Welcome back to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. I'm your host, Scott Shagory. Here on DT, we talk about scaling tech companies and helping CEOs do this with greater ease and flow. Today, we'll be talking with Ganesh Padmahaban. He's the founder and CEO of Autonomize AI, which utilizes AI agents, and copilots for or in healthcare workflows by summarizing unstructured data for better decision-making and improved patient outcomes. Autonomize AI is backed by healthcare VC firm AMV and tech VC firm ATX Venture Partners. Prior to Autonomize, Ganesh helped scale AI companies such as Molecula and CognitiveScale. Before that, spent time with multinationals Dell and Intel. Today, we'll be talking with Ganesh about the challenges and opportunities around scaling AI companies. Ganesh, thank you for carving out time today to talk with us, and welcome to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me. And, I'm definitely one of the two, disciplined and troublemaker. I'm not sure about both.
Well, that's who we like to talk to. So you're in the right place. To kind of, I guess, kick things off. Obviously, I've shared a little bit about your background in the intro here, but I guess in a few sentences, what is Autonomize developing to help your ideal audience in the healthcare space solve a key challenge with your particular secret sauce?
Yeah, no. So as I don't think there will be a lot of debate among your audience as well that healthcare is broken, and it's broken for patients everywhere. It's U.S. healthcare is messy, but it's the same case. Either it's cost of care or access to care or just the amount of inefficiencies that is there in delivering care. What we do at Autonomize is if you look at healthcare, one of the most impactful population within healthcare are the knowledge workers. Those are your doctors, your caregivers, your care managers, nurses, who have to put up with about 50-60% of their workflows is filled with mundane administrative tasks. Looking at information from a different system, correlating information from one system to another, ratifying information across multiple systems and so forth. And what we do is we give them all an AI sidekick or a copilot that'll help them make their workflows a lot more efficient, which will translate into, for healthcare organizations to do it more efficiently, you reduce this high cost time for them to do work. It improves cycle time for patients. Instead of waiting for a prior authorization decision for 3 weeks, you get it done in a matter of minutes because there's more efficiency in the way humans are adjudicating it. And then it translates to cost of care and better access to care across the spectrum.
Yeah, interesting. And just for clarity, both for me and I think my audience too, when we talk about unstructured data, specifically in the healthcare space, does that have, what does that encompass, I guess? We're, I think, all familiar with, email and a whole bunch of other things, but I'm guessing there's a whole range of additional unstructured data sets essentially in the healthcare space.
Yeah, no, I would say 80 to 90% of all data in healthcare is unstructured. And the way you define unstructured data is data that is not put in a spreadsheet with rows and columns, right? And if you think about it, medical charts, every time a doctor writes a summary about your visit, your lab reports where somebody actually explains their findings and impressions after a radiology test, your care management notes, your call center that you call and you talk to a care manager and you tell them all the problems that you're dealing with and how you're responding to certain medications, those call transcripts, imaging data that actually you take an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI, all of that stuff, it's all unstructured data across the spectrum, right? And the nuance about unstructured data is that since it's not analyzable in a spreadsheet, of rows and columns, it is really hard to analyze at scale. The other nuance in the space is that in healthcare especially, but it's true for any, heavily knowledge work centric industries, the context is also very relevant on how you use that data. The same medical chart of a lab report of a patient, when reviewed by a pharma clinical researcher, they look for very different contextual information from it. I want to see if they fit my 18 inclusion and exclusion criteria for a clinical trial. Whereas if a visiting physician reads that same data, they're going to look at very different context from the same data. So it's not only that data is very unstructured, it's also highly contextual. And you've got to pair that content with the context to go make that happen. That's what makes this really hard to solve.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about as reflecting ahead of today's conversation and chat, about that. I hadn't thought really. I had assumed, obviously incorrectly, that some sort of image data, whatever that might be, of well, it could be really anything. That actually would be at least semi-structured, but in the way that you've explained it, that makes perfect sense as to why so much data there is completely unstructured, because it doesn't have quote unquote genuine structure in the way in which it would be traditionally defined and used.
Or varying structure, right? So for example, the way Dr. A writes medical notes is going to be very different from Dr. B, right? So there is an element of variability, which makes it really hard to, I can't just go and do a statistical analysis to find out what everybody else is doing, right? So it's really hard to do it. Now, a lot of these with language models and large language models that are in there, with generative AI, all of these are getting a lot more better and easier. You have the right tools to go make it happen. But the tools or the models are only, I would say, less than 10% of the equation to solve these problems. You got to understand the context, you got to understand the workflow, you got to deliver it inside the action. So it's one thing to actually say, I have all this data and I've found 50 different things out of there, which is going to really help you, Mr. Doctor. But they don't have the time to actually change their workflows to go read that and then do things over, because you're just adding more administrative burden for them, right? So what you need to do is understand, where should you intercept them in their workflow? How do you intercept them with the right content, context, or insight, so they can do their job a little bit more joyfully and a lot more efficiently?
Yeah, a little more joy would be, I think, be more than welcome. That's for sure. And is it focused principally, say, in hospital settings or inpatient settings, or are we talking about outpatient rehab, or is it across the board in terms of where you guys are focused now, based on priority, size of team, et cetera, like that, or is it something else based on within the domain of the healthcare space?
Yeah, no. So we're a little over 3 years old as a company, and we operate across the entire healthcare spectrum, which is also very unique about us. I have a pet peeve that healthcare has this habit, or this the institutional approach to innovation in healthcare is siloed problem solving. You pick a problem, vertically integrate a solution top to bottom, and the next thing you know, you have 500 vendors for telehealth for a large health plan. Because that's the way we solve problem, because it's really hard to break into healthcare. So when we started the company, we were like, look, and then if I ask you, last 10 years, digital health has exploded. But has that made healthcare better or worse? Most people would argue it's probably made healthcare worse, not better, right? Yes. So what we wanted to do when we started the company was like, look, we wanted to build a platform company that really goes deeper into these workflows. Understand, like, at the heart of all of this is the patient. And if you can actually structure all of that data as it relates to a journey of a patient, a disease model of a patient, or the way they actually interact with the caregivers, then you can unlock a lot of efficiencies across the entire spectrum. So we work across life sciences, pharmaceuticals. We also help with a lot of the back office and middle office functions for health plans or insurance companies. They use it for prior authorization, for care management, case management, claims processing, and so forth, to all the way down to hospital settings. Mostly, I would say we are specifically not focused on playing a role between the patient and the doctor or the caregiver. We actually would like to be the sidekick for the doctor, rather than, like, there's a lot of companies who do what they call ambient AI, right, which is listening to what the patient is saying and then translating that and stuff like that. We actually fundamentally believe that while there's a lot of utility for that, the center of this universe is the patient, and the most qualified people to actually take care of them are the trained caregivers. And then from that, what we actually do is actually then we map out their workflows and say, this doctor is spending 60% of their time writing up their notes after a thing, or reviewing lab reports to summarize how they should talk to the patient. We'll take that part out and give them an AI sidekick that does that for them.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I mean, the short bit I'll add there is from what you shared just a moment ago. I would say in some ways, did help, particularly when it was a few years ago with my mom's final healthcare journey for 2 years. But in other areas, it just created a great degree of complexity, and where for my brother and I, we were able to track and stay on top of things, but it absolutely required a great deal of sustained commitment. I probably spent 20 hours a week managing that piece of it and making sure that nothing fell through the cracks, with different communication mediums to following up to tracking and moving and things like that. It was doable. I made it a priority. But I think for even on the patient side, let alone for doctors, providers, and many people like yourselves kind of behind the scenes, if you will, yeah, it's just it's an incredibly complex way and cumbersome way of actually delivering a set of services to a patient or even a patient's family. Essentially, yeah, powerful. Yeah.
No,
In
thank you.
in
No,
terms of, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, right, look, in as I said, like the most powerful person or the role or the in the ecosystem of healthcare outside of the patient is the caregiver, is the physician, is the provider.
Yep.
And nobody in their right minds will go and become a doctor if you really think about it, except for altruistic reasons, right? Because doctors
Yeah.
get paid, but they don't get paid as much as Google or Apple engineers. They don't get stock options. They listen
Yep.
to sick people all day. They're taking care of problems. They have all kinds of, agony around them at all given point in time. They're mentally also invested in this. They come back home tired and stuff. And then instead of them having to spend time with their families and having a good conversation and talk about this, they have to now take care of all the admin work they could not do because they were taking care of the patients, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the state of affairs in healthcare. And if you can really use AI to solve something, I mean, of course, you can empower the patient and give them more tools and stuff, which we are going to do, and we're in the process of doing that. But the immediate opportunity to make a outsized impact is to make every doctor. We have close to 3 million nurses in the United States. That's not much, right? And we have nursing shortages everywhere. We have probably
Yep.
about a 1 to 1.5, I may be off on that number of providers or doctors in the country. Um, that's not enough to take care of 350 million people, right? So you
I
give
know.
them scale, you give them ability to go and scale their impact across multiple people, and that's what we really, thrilled about doing.
Yeah, no, that's great. What does, I guess shifting ever so slightly, what does, with you guys being 3 years old, being where you are right now, what does scale look like to you and the team today? And then let's say it is 12 months or maybe 18 months out, as the AI space seemingly changes almost every day now. So, what
Yeah.
does that look like for you guys?
Well, I mean, the I've been fortunate to be in early stage companies and journeys before, like in addition to my corporate career as well. So, it's always interesting. You learn every time. And when you start off, when you initially start the company, you're just trying to get back to brass tacks, right? It's not you're trying to make sure that you're doing something because you're going to invest a lot of your personal energy, your social capital, your family
Indeed.
capital, missed birthdays and trips and all of that stuff for a very long time. The one thing that people don't realize is startups are not just a startup. Starting is easy. Sustaining it, making sure that you actually get through it. Actually, I take that back. Even starting is not easy, but the go through it. So one of the first
Yeah.
things you want to do is gain so much conviction that this is worth your time and your
Hmm.
energy, all the things you have to sacrifice over the next decade or more, right? So initial part of the scaling process or starting process was all about validation, like making sure, are you solving a real problem? Are you just getting happy ears from people that you're telling them because they like you and they want to make you feel good and do that? No, you want to go and we wanted to do something that is meaningful, that makes a difference, right?
Right.
So it was like mission driven. So initial year for us was about finding those. We solved so many different varied kinds of problems because we were trying to find the problem that A has the maximum impact and then
Yeah.
B also gives us a pathway to build a sustainable business, right? Year
Hmm.
two, was more about like once we found out a few set of problems, and more than anything, like and I'll tell you how the scaling mechanics of this actually comes in. Year one was also finding the problem, getting validation, but also assembling the real early 0 to 1 team, right? A small group of folks who are mission driven, more mission driven than talent driven, right? So that kind of stuff. Because there's a lot of hacking, there's a lot of things trying to figure it out. And then as we went into the second year, there was like, okay, I think we have some validation. Now, how do we put and double down and form some conviction, build some product, make sure that we're actually delivering this in a way that can sustain, that can be sustainable value. Like for example, I mean, a classic example. Yes, you can do a lot of things with OpenAI's API, but some of the things won't even make sense because you're going to end up spending more time and energy building something and doing that than the value it generates, right? Those kind of problems are all over healthcare or all over AI, for example. So we had to really build conviction in saying, solve a problem that's worth solving. Number two, make sure that somebody's ready to pay for it and you actually can build a sustainable business behind it. And then last year has been about our early scaling, and this year is going to be a big scaling year for us, right? So, if the team, we actually went from like 0 to about 40 FTEs in the last year, plus contractors. We're about 60, 65, 70 people working in the company for different factions. We have set up operations in overseas in India. We have a team in Canada. We have a team here in Austin, Texas, where we're headquartered in. We have folks all over. We did our early seed fundraising about a year and a half ago. So gearing up for our next financing milestone, and more about that later. It's a place of actually, and I always believed in this, right? You want to assemble the best A-star team, and then the team is half the work. I mean, I strongly believe it, right? A lot of my focus is recruiting, hiring, convincing people who's like, oh, there's no way I'm going to come join your company, to actually say, maybe how will it look if I start with you guys, right? So a lot of that. And I think, there is different muscles that you have to exercise as you grow and scale. And earlier, as I said, it was about product and, more about like, making sure the problem statements, the go-to-market and all of that stuff. Now to me is things like culture building and making sure that we're actually focused on, I mean, it is not me and Chris, my co-founder, anymore, right? So it's like, how do we make sure you put in systems in place so that everyone we hire upgrades us as a company, right? And how do you make sure the mission is very, pervasive across the company, that everybody should be, even new interns. We had every Thursday we do all hands for the company, and we've been doing it for almost 3 years now. And without fail, today we had a bunch of new hires who came in, and you could tell the energy level they bring in on their day one or their week one. And they come and they introduce themselves like, and we did a quick update. Hey, we had this board meeting this week. Here's all the things happening. Here's the new customers coming on. Here's some of the values. Here's what they said about it. And I have questions. And just that whole like ownership mindset, one of those things that, I really take a lot of pride trying to drive across the company. Seeing that in new hires that I wasn't even involved in hiring and recruiting, it's just amazing to see, right? So it's like setting in the systems and processes and, to go make this happen. So that's the scaling mechanics right now. The top of mind for me is personally about like, how do you recruit the right people, get the next, the next phase of growth? What kind of leadership team do we need to go make that happen? What kind of systems do you have to put in place and so forth?
Yeah, no, it's, I think both, and you've obviously had a stint in corporate. I had a long stint in corporate too. It's always fantastic to see that new energy come in. But just how precious that is as well, where very quickly it can be soured and or crushed. So if you can go ahead and build those expectations, or at least, again, share and feel as though that new intern experiences connection, they experience both the wins and the challenges, gets a sense from you as a leader, all of those things just mean, I think, a great deal, where even at 60 plus, it's still a small, tight community, no matter how you cut it. And given the geographic how disparate Canada, India, yourselves in Texas, just again, how impactful that is, but also how easy that is as we read stories on, Crunchbase or elsewhere when things go sideways or go wrong. There's the impact that can really have. So that's great that you've been able to create that and then do so quickly with, going from just the two of you and Chris, to now 60 plus. And I would assume you've got a trajectory for what that looks like by year's end. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. What do you think, I guess, finally, before taking a short break here coming up, what do you think is most misunderstood by the market today about what your company does? Earlier, you talked about many of the challenges in the healthcare space, but inevitably, when you go out and, quote unquote, sell, there are inevitably misunderstandings, the false assumptions that they have about what you're doing or who you are, et cetera, like that. With what you're comfortable sharing, what do you think the market and or potential clients, misunderstand about what, you and the team do today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't thought about it that much, but I think, it's like, when we had the conversation before we kicked off today, right? Like, off the record on like long form conversations versus,
Yep.
thinking like a goldfish in 7 seconds or less, right? And so
Excuse me.
the attention span of, humanity has collectively declined over the last, 10 years or so. In fact, actually,
Yeah.
a side note, there was a early research that came out how reasoning LLM models decreases the critical reasoning skills of human beings who use them. There was a very, very recent paper. I think yesterday I saw a draft on it. I didn't spend too much time on it. Again, back to my 7 second that I had, I actually read the title and everything else out. So there's to your question on what people misunderstand is like, look, not every company is created equal, right? Not every, it's hard to, when you have a technology like AI, which by the way, there's this just lay out the land in the market. There is incredible hype around what AI can do. There is a lot of promise on what AI can do, but there's also this, like the DeepSeek event that happened last week when they launched a new model that tanked Nvidia's stock price by 30% in a day's time. Just goes to show how much people don't understand what is happening, to be honest with you, respectfully, right? So there is a lot of headline grabbing activity that happens where like, oh, you guys are AI for X and stuff. AI for healthcare means so many different things. So in our experience, what we've been really good at doing is taking the time to kind of like translate what we do to what value you can get out of it, right? So when we go meet clients, it is about saying, yes, we happen to use AI agents to do this, but what we're really doing is help you shape your operational P&L to be 30% less than SG&A and making sure that your kind of knowledge workers are a lot more happier when they go home every day, right? So it resonates really well. One of the things we try to do is actually try to stay away from all of the buzzwords and stuff like that. You got to do a little bit of that for, SEO and stuff like that. But, AI means so many different things for so many different people. What we want to be known for, and we actually repeatedly, reinforce that with customers, like we're about, augmenting your knowledge workers. We're about making sure that we are bringing, today it's AI, tomorrow it might be a whole new technology. And we want to bring the best, but there is a gap between what the technology can do and what the business value can be delivered, because there's that all of the stack that happens in between is understanding of the process, the workflows, the people, the users, the dynamics, the context, all of that stuff. We want to provide the shortest path to get you to value on all of those things, right? That's what we actually completely reinforce with our customers all the time. So I wouldn't say like, we're probably less known than misunderstood, because if they talk to us, they very clearly understand that, what we do is very, very clear, and it's funny, and even investors get this wrong, right? Where it's investors all about pattern matching, and they want to put people in buckets and patterns and columns and maps and stuff like that. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. I mean, in fact, if there's anything that we have learned over the history of disruptions that really change, like, be it Airbnb. What category would you have put Airbnb in when they were launching? What
Yeah.
category would you have put Uber in when they were launching, right? So it is really hard to, and it's easy to, look back and connect the dots, as Steve Jobs says.
Yeah.
It's really hard to look forward and say, where's this going to go? So I think, look, focusing on the basics, making sure you're actually solving real problems, delivering real value for folks is more critical than ever before. And that's what we focused on.
Yeah, no, amen to all of that. So I think, particularly, the one comment I'll make is around investor sentiment, where much of that categorization and putting you in a box is, just to make their lives easier, and it's also just to market and sell, as in make sure my management fees are there, make sure I'm, raising my next round or next fund, excuse me. It's all about positioning for LPs. I think in many, many cases, it's much less
It also,
about actually understanding yourselves or the firm. Not that we all don't pattern, we do. And it's essential to do so to create shortcuts and things. But yeah, I just think quite a foolish way to do. And the examples you cited, Airbnb and Uber, are fantastic because they were category breaking pieces and not easy to place in a cute little box with a pretty bow.
Yeah, yeah. And I know I totally understand why they do it, as you said. Like, LPs are often not very sophisticated to understand the nuances, so you want to
Yeah.
simplify it to them, and you want to, it's like, yeah, it just makes sense from that perspective, but not incredibly helpful for everybody, but for
Yeah,
educating the
no,
market.
not at all. Well, let's go ahead and take a short break, and we will be right back. Purple Finch Group helps technology CEOs innovating at the edge of chaos create operational fitness across their technology stack and team of talent. Achieving significant and measurable scale, selling your story, and finding time to think and plan can feel like a bridge too far. So if you're a CEO whose company has found product market fit but is struggling, or you're a CEO whose company is looking to accelerate existing momentum, we can help with proven blueprints for optimal scale. Shifting from incremental addition to exponential multiplication can be absolutely achieved with less effort and stress. To get in touch, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Now, back to the interview. All right, we are back at the Discipline Troublemakers podcast with Ganesh. And so to shift gears a little bit here, what type of work, the work that you do now, gives you either the most joy or gives you joy and energy that's uplifting in what is a challenging role and in a space that moves very, very quickly?
No, it's I get a lot of joy from doing all the mundane stuff that comes with this. And there are days that I complain, and my wife just reminds me, saying, "You signed up for it. You had agency over this." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right, you're right." And so I try to be pretty equanimous on, like, if I'm just updating, updating cap tables for a board meeting coming up, working on board slides versus meeting a customer or solving a problem or doing an engineering deep dive on a particular hard problem that the team's been working on.
Yeah.
I tend to approach it all as something, with the same mindset, right? Where you're trying to learn something to take an action or to just improve your understanding. So every
Yeah.
every task that you do is actually one of that, and it kind of buckets into that. So tend to do that. But I think, that said, there are definitely some favorites and not so favorites, right? And what gives me joy and stuff. I mean, I love, spending time with customers. I mean, I can tell you this, it is part of this is actually, it's on the one hand, it is very validating for a lot of things, and you tell them what we have been able to do for others, and they tell you their problems. They're like, "Hey, here's where I'm struggling with. You may have this greatest product, but let me tell you, this is what we're struggling with." And just taking that, and we try to do a really good job of making sure everybody has visibility into this, including the engineers writing code for a small piece of
Yeah.
software in this thing. So, and then on the other hand, it's also very humbling, right? We were with the CTO of a large healthcare organization yesterday, and we were showing them one of the product managers were very excited about showcasing one particular part of the demo. It's like, hey, John, see this. This is an amazing thing. And he stopped us like, stop. That doesn't move the needle for me. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, it was just very direct, right? Very humbling, right? Now that piece of thing that they were showing, they loved the overall product, but then they were like, that little thing doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm not that interested. So it's very humbling to actually, it's a reminder to say, look, I mean, you're never perfect, and you're never going to figure it all out, right? You have to, it's the constant iteration that happens. And to really treat customers as partners to help us move closer to it. I mean, they left the call, the CTO was like so complimentary. He's like, man, you guys are so refreshing to work with. I mean, like, you tell me what, like, oh, and we challenged them when they were asking, questions. Oh, isn't this how it worked? Like, no, you got this wrong. Here's how it works, and here's why. Here's why everybody who talks and writes blogs about it usually don't know what they're doing, and they're writing blogs about it. They're not writing code about it. So we'll tell you what is wrong. This is what you got to think about it this way. And they appreciated that. There's a lot of education. There's a lot of give and a lot of take. I enjoy that. I mean, that customer interaction part is just amazing. I'm an engineer at heart, so I love to solve really tough problems. And I think I think there's a wide variety of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I probably don't get a lot of joy doing, but it's very rare. It's very, very rare. Sometimes, you're always doing it at the service of something, right? So even if you're just doing, I have to update this spreadsheet to get the equity allocations for, the employee handout. I mean, you're doing it because you have to do it because those employees are putting their career and their lives into this and making this happen. So you always look at this as, whatever you have to do, just do it as a service to something that, that's going to further somebody's ambitions and aspirations, right? So I get a lot of joy from like the customer interactions, the, thinking through. I mean, there is so much. One of the things I've started doing a lot more because a lot of customers and partners are asking us saying, look, help me demystify the noise here. The noise levels are so high. I mean, I resisted writing anything on LinkedIn about the DeepSeek episode because there was so much DeepSeek, washing that was happening, and then somebody sent me a saying, no, just don't worry about DeepSeek. Just say what it means to you, and then we'll take away from it, right? So I wrote a small blurb on saying like what this really means. I mean, there's a lot of positives here, which is, hey, great. I mean, like open source wins, and this is where just, I fundamentally believe in, there was a video that I shot like during COVID actually, which, basically was a prediction to the future for myself to go back and look at it. And I was like, I'm going to just put it out there saying, and I'll send that to you. It's basically saying like there's two fundamental trends that are going to reshape everything as we know. And one of that is hyper automation, which is everything from AI and everything that we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
And the second thing is radical decentralization. So the big thing that's going to happen, and it's because and I spent a lot of time during the COVID years when you had a lot of time, everybody had a lot of time just digging back into history, and it is just so fascinating to see how human society has evolved and life has evolved and intelligence has evolved over centuries and decades and billions of years. That's the only way. So to me, it's like, the whole radical decentralization of intelligence, automation of everything and stuff, it's just going to fundamentally rewrite and change everything. So a lot of the things I did was, I do right now is try to make sure that add in a little bit more, a drop of clarity in the world of noise, right? To make sure that, sometimes it's just a point of view and I could be totally wrong. There are a lot of blog posts that I wrote that did not age well, and it's okay. It's just a point in time knowledge, right? So I enjoy that. I mean, I enjoy that part of, and I try to do a lot more, rebooting my podcast back up, stories in AI. I took a break in Q4 last year. It just became incredibly, challenging last year in terms of like, time, right? More than anything. And so I'm going to kick that off. We're probably going to launch another podcast in the intersection of healthcare for another time. But it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be. And more than anything, the signal to noise ratio needs to be higher. The signal to noise ratio needs to be everybody's problem, right? And we see that in everywhere. So excited about that part of what I do today.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think to be able to and enjoy both the engineering piece as well as the, I'll call it sales enablement, or just even talking with the community, your ideal audience, etc. As we, both have been in tech for a long period of time, often you'll find one or the other to have someone who enjoys both, or there are things to grab onto with both on both sides of the conversation in the domain areas, where you can not only can communicate internally and then externally to customers, but just enjoy the process, not have it be something that literally pulls energy out of you, is, I think, hugely impactful. And then, as you shared with the example of that CTO, they can always feel that. You can always feel where there's that genuine give and take. You've established not just rapport, but some trust, and you've made an investment. It's even an emotional investment in the well-being of that CTO, even if he or she is incredibly numbers driven. And I find personally in my own work, it makes a huge difference. People absolutely recognize that you genuinely care about them. And when you do that, or when you demonstrate it, it just, it has the conversation enrich itself in, a thousand different dimensions and hold itself for a much longer period of time. People remember that stuff powerfully.
It's fascinating, right? I mean, almost every, one of the things I learned probably a little late in my career, and I didn't, because I was like very numbers driven, operations, engineering, depth, technical kind of guy. And then all of a sudden there was this moment of realization where, like, if you really map out, all outcomes and all results are a result of people. And it's just like, I mean, that might change over time with AI or a form of non-living intelligence being a co-pilot or a coexisting with human intelligence. But it is almost always people. And not losing sight of that. And at the end of the day, you're talking to somebody. Yes, you're trying to sell, they're trying to buy, but you're making a human connection. You're trying to make it real for them. And that, like you said, that interaction makes a huge difference. They actually see that, hey, you genuinely care, you're authentic, you're trying to solve a problem. You may have your motivations and you're upfront about it. Makes a huge difference, because it goes for trust building. And if they don't trust you, they won't work with you. I mean, especially when we're relatively still an early stage startup, like, they don't trust us, they won't work with us. So we spend a lot of time, and I think every founder should do this too, right? Just, it is all about trust building. It is all about making sure that you're giving more than you're taking in every relationship and interaction that you're having. So, but it's definitely exciting and energizing to do that.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And I think, again, per what you shared earlier, being able to share and, if you will, evangelize within the team, given the growth that you've experienced, and be able to have the newest intern to someone who's overtired in Canada to the time difference in India, et cetera, like that, with your team, all hands meetings and things like that, to be able to draw that energy together, channel it in productive ways while holding on to the vision and obviously handling the financial side and things like that to hit your metrics. Those are a lot of glass balls to juggle, and to be able to do that well is fantastic, and still have a stressed out CTO be genuinely connected to everything and be looking forward to chatting with you guys, again and again to solve something that's really important for them. Yeah. How, as we've touched on it in a couple of ways, but I always like to nail this one down a little bit if you're open to it, which is, how is being CEO of a company that you've created now, transformed you? How has that shifted you in a way that you feel, comfortable talking about, either professionally or personally, and so forth? How has it, moved you in a way that is fundamentally different than when you started?
It's a great question. I think in multiple ways. Again, it's a CEO's role is exactly that middle word, execution, right? So if you can't execute and you don't execute, there's nothing, then the C and O doesn't matter as much, right? So being truly the chief executing officer or executive officer is actually very, very key. And what that means is like a hands-on approach. To me, and I've always been that way and it's natural for me personally to become very hands-on. But as CEO, you also have to start thinking about, and it's also stages, right? I mean, like there's all this noise about founder mode, right? So I'm always on founder mode. Every founder is always on founder mode. But you also have to start thinking at different stages about like when early on, and you still have to turn on those modes at times. But early on, the first year, it was all about you're just 100% founder mode. You're trying to solve the problem. You're not trying to do anything else. You're trying to find the problem, solve the problem, validate it. Well, now it is not just that, it's like empowering and enabling others to do the same thing too, right? At the time, not everybody will have the same context as you do, so you'll still have to get into founder mode on, and then you go solve that problem. But then with the mindset of ensuring that others can see it. I mean, for me, it's all about, to me, at this point, is how do I take myself out of the critical path on something, and then empower others to do it. And there are still a lot of things that I still have critical path on, and I'm always going to be there in that critical path and stuff. But how has it changed me over the last 3 years here? It's like, look, I mean, parenting changes you quite a bit. I know that, and then everybody knows that and stuff. One part of it is that, which is like you always think about it, and then with an execution mindset and wanting to get things done, and having this wake up every morning thinking, how can I make this day the most amazing day ever that happened for everybody around me and for myself and the company and so forth. You get impatient. You start, like there are emotions that goes up and down. But in all those moments, one thing I learned, and that you learned from parenting that you apply into being a CEO, is like the kids are driving you crazy. They're just running all over it and stuff like that. Nobody wants to get into the shower. Nobody wants to go have breakfast. They don't want to get ready. There's people waiting on you, all that stuff. At the end of the day, they're still your kids. And you don't forget that, right? And it's that, to me, it's also about like constantly reminding that, hey, we have assembled a group of folks. And I'm not a huge believer in, oh, it's a family and all that stuff. It's more, it's a championship, sports team, right? The best way to think about it. Everybody needs to perform at a minimum level. Everybody needs to be at the top of their game for you to win the championship, right? And how do you create that mindset? But at the end of the day, I mean, like, things go wrong, people make mistakes and all of that stuff, and you just come down, go back to the center and go recenter yourself, saying like, why are we doing what we're doing? Let's go back at it, hack at it tomorrow. Just take a day off, just come back and hack at it tomorrow. So trying to get more, I think the right word is equanimous on like, and there's a lot of ups and downs, right? As you can imagine, as CEO, as a founder, there's like some days are amazing, some days are like, the market beating you down, or like you're something to deal with that you're not like there's like we had colleagues who were impacted by the LA fires, so dealing with situations like that, and at the end of the day, you just have to just stretch out the timeline and then go look at it and say there's positives, there's negatives, there's ups and downs and stuff, but over a long period of time, it evens out, and it always going to be. I mean, if you focus it the right way, it'll be a net positive. Just not losing sight of that longer term view is, I think, one big thing that we strive really hard to put, get everybody to appreciate.
Yeah, no, I think that last bit's really critical, and I think what's great with, I'll call them domain areas like healthcare, or an area that I focus on is cybersecurity or others. You always or often can find people who are very mission driven, and so that roots you in your vision. It roots you in aligning with teams or people who really care, and where it matters. It actually has a very impactful way of changing people's lives in your circumstance, both practitioners as well as those who are patients, say like my mom in the past or things like that, which it does matter. It actually matters. It's not yet selling one additional widget. It's not about enabling or increasing your subscription service by X%. It's just it moves well beyond that. So on those days that are very challenging, it helps, I think, root you as to, okay, why am I actually here? What are we doing that's meaningful? And helps to, I think, just center one. I focus a lot on some pretty hardcore meditation and so forth, in addition to my martial arts. And it's always just fascinating to me how much I can try and center myself sometimes in a way that's really helpful to me. And I know, other people have their own, methods for achieving that, but it's, I think, not dissimilar.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there, before we go ahead and wrap up and, ask how, you'd like people to get in touch with you, you have talked a little bit about, obviously, a lot of growth. You're in year number 3. You're going to be scaling pretty aggressively. Is there anything that you're going to be doing in the next 12 months in terms of, if you're comfortable sharing it, a bit of a raise or other sorts of things? Essentially, is there anything you'd like some help with? Because obviously my ideal audience are tech CEOs, but there are others who do listen. So if you need some help with something and you're comfortable sharing it, I'd be happy to go ahead and make sure the audience knows about that too.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Scott. Thanks for asking that. I think, look, we have a pretty big year in front of us, and it's kicked off in very high gear over the last few weeks already, which is great. We're going to be we're hiring some key positions here in the US, also in India. So there's a lot of, like we're looking for folks who are mission driven, who understand the complexities of working with old school industries like healthcare, who's got the experience, the bandwidth, the patience, and the will to actually muscle through everything to go make it happen. So we're looking for folks to lead our implementation services. We're looking for customer success leads. We're looking for machine learning engineers and stuff like that. So there's a lot of hiring, and we're looking to grow and scale pretty fast on the one hand. On the other hand, we're also trying to, I think the ecosystem in healthcare, no one company can change it entirely, right? So we're always looking for, is there a 1 + 1 = 15 story here with somebody else? Is there a win-win? Is there a way to actually increase our distribution on the one hand, but then improve the value of somebody else? So there's a lot of that kind of thing that we're thinking through, saying, look, how do we go deliver on a lot of this value? Like I'll tell you one example that we got a lot of. We noticed that this, when we deliver our software, we're a software business primarily, so it's or like software as a service, if you will. We deploy software and we actually deliver value for them. But there's a lot of adjacent services that actually has to be delivered to deliver value. So what we started doing was, earlier we used to deliver those services. We stopped doing that. We started recruiting other partners to do that part. And together, you give them a path to actually modernize their practice. So now we have some of these partners building on our platform to go build capabilities they would otherwise put a low margin service on to make 20-30% margin. All of a sudden they can actually do a repeatable software-ish offering on our platform and then sell that at 60 to 70% margin. So there's a lot of that thing, and part of our scaling is going to be in that part as well. So a lot of recruiting, a lot of hiring. We're always looking for customers and partners who see the challenge of, I think the big unique thing, how we've been very clear about, if you're a large healthcare enterprise just looking to buy a product to replace an existing product, not very interesting. I mean, of course, we'll take your business, but that's not interesting. What is interesting for us is if you have the will to look at this and say, look, my operating model today of delivering care cost me $9 per patient per month. How can I bring that down to $3 or $4 so I can pass on that benefit to the patient? I can lower their premiums if you're an insurance company. I can improve my cycle time by doing this. When you fundamentally start looking at it that way, and you're not just solving for siloed problems, then you can do magic. And we have the toolkit to actually for you to do that magic as a healthcare enterprise, to go in and say, look, how can I cut my authorization decision time by 50%, but at the same time improve my visibility of care gaps and identify care gaps from a member population early on than later on. All of the above, these are hard problems, and you cannot solve it in silos. You have to have an approach to look across the spectrum, understand that patient journey from one end to the other, and see how you can actually enable them, right? So we're always looking for partners and customers who think the same way, or even if you don't, call us, let us know, challenge us, and I think we're really motivated to go change healthcare. I mean, I think and and we deserve to do that for the patients, for everybody in the world, right? So
Yep.
that's where we are.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. I think we can all agree that the healthcare space, particularly in the U.S., I'm sure it's globally as well, in respective markets or geographies, could certainly be improved. And yeah, to enable that's always, I think, hugely powerful for everybody. In terms of closing things out here, how would you like people to get in touch with you? Would it be via your website, the company's website, excuse me, or maybe LinkedIn? What would be the way or ways that you would prefer?
So I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so that's like I'm kind of semi-active on Twitter. I still haven't figured out Twitter yet, but so send me a connection request, or follow the page. And then check out Autonomize.ai, and we are actually, we're the website only tells probably part of the story, but it's like the common story that everybody needs. But reach out to us through that, right? There's career portals, there is find more thing, book a demo, need more information. You can do all of that stuff too. But I'm personally very active on LinkedIn, so reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Yep. And I can share with the audience, he is active on LinkedIn. He's absolutely telling the truth, too. So by all means, do that if you want. Well, Ganesh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for carving out time to speak with us today on the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast. Everyone, please check out Autonomous AI. And if you've got anything that would be helpful to Ganesh, please go ahead and reach out to him. And we will be back with another episode of the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast very soon. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you for tuning into the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast, and we hope you found the episode valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the Disciplined Troublemakers podcast on your favorite platform and leave a review. Putting this podcast together is a group effort, so I'd like to provide a shout out to Heartcast Media and their team for all of the assistance they provide with each episode. If you want to get in touch with me directly, I can be reached at Scott with 2 T's at purplefinchgroup.com. Purple Finch Group is the sponsor of this podcast. We have another podcast episode out very shortly. Stay tuned.